Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our CESA Spotlight webinar. We're very excited and we're very happy to be able to do this, to share all this information with you, thanks to the support of Energy Dome. So this is our new long-duration energy storage technologies that help us get to 100% renewable energy on the grid webinar. First, I'd like to kick us off with the webinar, talking a little bit about CESA. CESA, the California Energy Storage Alliance, we're the definitive voice of energy storage in California. We are a 501c6 membership-based advocacy group committing to advancing the role of energy storage in the electric power sector. We are at over 100 members strong, and I'd like to give a shout out to our members as well, our board members and our general members as well. So if we could go maybe to the next slide, please. Yeah, this is our CESA board members. You can see we have members from all over the energy storage ecosystem, the environment. In the next slide as well, I'd also like to thank our general, startup, and associate members as well. And we here at CESA, we are a big tent organization. We're a technology and business model agnostic, and we really are excited to see how there is significant diversity and growth across the industry. And we want to just further that message and allow others in the sector to be aware of the advances in different technologies and different opportunities as well. So before going into the subject matter of today, I also want to give a quick plug for CESA's participation in this year's ESNA Intersolar North America and Energy Storage North America event next week in Long Beach. I know a lot of people in the industry will be around there. We'll be there too. I personally will be participating at a workshop on energy storage interconnection basics and best practices across the U.S. and as well in California. And we'll be talking a lot about utility scale interconnection, distributed interconnection, and DERs, electric vehicles. It will be quite interesting. Hope you can make it on Monday, February 13th at 1 p.m. And if not, you can always go to our booth and we'll also be there, happy to talk to you and learn how we can help you further your business on energy storage or better understand the sector as well. Yes, so I would love to thank all of our speakers for today, all of our panelists. You can see here, this webinar has been done with the support of Energy Dome. So I would really like to thank them for the idea, the direction, but also all of their work in bringing this group together as well. So Joe, maybe you want to say a few words.
Yeah, sure. Just real quickly, just what you said, Sergio. Thank you so much for the panelists, Jan and Gary. It'll be a great lineup today. I'm really excited about this forum. And I want to thank all of you attending for joining us. So hopefully this will be a fun session, and I hope you have a lot of questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. So one final thing before we go into the presentations of our panelists, we decided to start with a couple of poll questions to gauge the interest in the subject matter and understand where the audience is coming from, what's the starting point to the conversation. So we can get started with the first one. So do you think that traditional lithium-ion technologies are worse suited for long-duration energy storage? We're thinking 8 to 16 plus hours. Let's give it another 5 seconds or so, and then we'll go to our second question. Okay, and then this is particularly, for the buyers and planners and regulators in the room. Are you considering long duration energy storage for your portfolio? As you can see here, there's a couple of options that are affirmative, but would like to know a bit more of your thoughts. Is it just lithium ion, something that is not lithium ion? Are you agnostic about the technology, or do you think that the LDES need hasn't yet manifested in your portfolio? Okay, so let's see. Do you think traditional lithium ion? I think a majority of people are either they don't believe that lithium ion is very well suited or they're undecided, but majority definitely doesn't think that it's very well suited. So very interesting finding then. And on the second question, lots of tech agnosticism on what to use for LDES, but also a vast majority are considering it. So this is very interesting. And I think that we have a quite a good crowd then. Maybe this is self-selection bias, but this I think is exactly the conversation for the type of answers we've seen. So let me stop delaying this and let's go in with our first panelist for the day, Dr. Gary Doris. I'd like to do a quick intro. Dr. Doris holds a PhD in applied economics and finance from Cornell University. He also has a BS in mechanical engineering and a BA in economics, magna cum laude, from Cornell as well. He's been a pioneer in the development of innovative solutions for energy risk management and portfolio planning over the last 2 decades. And as the CEO and co-founder of Ascend Analytics, his expertise is highly sought after to provide testimony on risk management, asset valuation, and resource planning, including acting as the lead expert witness for Merrill Lynch in the prominent Enron proceedings. So definitely a vast experience, a lot of understanding. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Doris, and let's get started. Oh, I believe we cannot hear you at this point. Uh, hmm.
Should work.
Oh,
No?
there you are. I can hear you now.
Okay. Great. Well, limited technology here. Thank you for the kind introduction. I look forward to going over some materials today. This is going to be really exciting. I have a lot to cover on long duration storage. Look, my company's focus is on the economics of storage and how long duration storage not only has a reliability role, but has an economic role in terms of how the market signals are creating opportunities for long duration storage. And I'd say California is the spearhead of this economic opportunity, and I'll be showing that right now. So if we can go forward, I have the obligatory couple minutes on Ascend, and then we'll get right into it. Ascend is a leading energy analytics company, as mentioned, 100+ employees. It's about 30 or so PhDs, so really high nerd factor company. I guess I'm referred to as nerd in chief. We're working over the full soft stack of analytics for the energy transition, from our long-term market intelligence, where we're pretty ubiquitous in forecasting the price of energy for every node in the country, to portfolio risk management and planning, to storage valuation through our battery sim and siting, and our insurance products around standalone storage, which is going really well. We'll be announcing quite a few insurance-backed projects in the next month or so. And our smart bidder are actually operating over 6 gigs today in the day-ahead real-time market, and are now a QZ in Texas and a scheduling coordinator in California. So with that, we can go on. And in terms of our forecasts, I think if you're involved in the industry and you're going towards a project financing or some sort of transaction with an asset, we're tending to be involved in almost anything that is a hybrid or a standalone storage, and certainly would like to think that kind of the insights and diligence we put forward towards understanding the new market dynamics and what drives the variability in price that creates opportunity for storage is something we've captured very nicely. And testament to the 150 or so customers on our platform, than just for storage valuation alone. So today we get to talk a little bit about what long duration storage, its needs, the possibilities in terms of technologies. I'm going to go light there, and I really want to focus on the economic merits and where this stands and where it's looking today. I think electricity markets have had their say in terms of value of storage, and it's been significant returns, certainly in California over the last 5 years. We're running these assets, and they're doing well at the 4-hour level right now. They're doing extremely well. There's definitely room for improvement, and I think the markets and their rules certainly need to continue to reflect the true marginal cost of production as best as possible to have the pure and correct price signals to incentivize storage for both the long and short duration. Let's focus a little bit on the technologies if we can to start this. So next slide. In terms of storage, the evolution, I'd say, particularly for the last 5 years, has been about integrating renewables. And that began with regulation, which is the fast up-down movements of kind of minutes to seconds, so definitely sub 5 minutes in one direction. And the idea is that the system has demand and supply. We want to keep them in sync, so we're at 60 hertz. That's what regulation is. And then there's longer term movements, kind of the 5-15 minute market. We call that ink and deck, or incremental movements up and down. And that's what balancing authorities like CESA or anybody in the WEC who's their own balancing authority would refer to the movements as inks and decks. And again, the sub 5 minute movements, even sub 1 minute movements as regulation. So regulation's fast, ink and deck are slower, more directional movements, typically responding to prices. Certainly in CESA, that's the case. And as we go further out, we have diurnal cycles, and that's a big one in California when the sun sets. We'll show that in just a minute. And then there's longer term reliability, which isn't just about integrating over the course of a day and chipping away at the sundown hours, but how can we handle longer duration, bigger events? We're trying to decarbonize and move beyond integration and pure reliability into 100% clean grid. And there's no question longer duration storage has a role there. And obviously the Google standard of 24/7 green, we're going to need longer duration storage for when the sun sets. Reliability wise, we'll see it's called ELCC, electric load carrying capabilities. It depends on levels of penetration of storage at different durations. We'll cover that in just a minute. For now, I just want to do a quick overview on the next slide of storage technologies and the need for storage just to integrate renewables, which is where we are today. Right now, California has a 4-hour storage requirement, and that makes sense. You certainly get a fair bit of reliability out of 4 hours, and moreover, we can economically integrate renewables. And that's what the market is saying. If the markets are working correctly and the prices are manifested of the cost of production, we end up with storage doing really well at, typically on a merchant basis, we're looking at somewhere between 2.5 and 4 hours storage. If it's contracted, it's almost always 4-hour storage. But you can make a little bit more in the shorter duration storage, it seems, because of the amount that they can earn just tackling those 5-15-minute prices, and still contribute significantly towards reliability. That's principally about renewable integration and dimensions of reliability at the 4-hour level. What we're looking at here is a complicated graph, to say the least, but at the top, you'll see load. And then the brown line just below that, with a black line kind of drawn through as the point-to-point averages, moving average, that's net load. And the difference between load and net load is we subtract off the solar in yellow and the wind in teal green. The difference between the smooth average black line and the brown line is the regulation frequency. That's shown at the bottom of the graph. And those are the shorter term movements and fluctuations where the system needs to be balanced, and those fast responding resources, typically storage, step in and keep the system at 60 hertz. Keep your eye on the end of the day. At around 6 p.m., you see sun setting and you see the net load going from, in this case, 450 megawatts to about 1150 megawatts. That's an enormous swing of 700 megawatts in a very short period of time. That's where you need flexibility, and price signals typically come in, and that's where storage certainly can earn its keep. That's one dimension of storage, capturing the variability. We clearly need that flexibility to integrate renewables. The question is, how can we move from this pure integration and capturing the movements of regulation in just the sundown hours of kind of ink and deck, to taking the excess, which will occur in certain periods. And you can see that here. Actually, we'll see that next couple slides. We'll show some excesses. But there's, in California, we'll see during the spring in particular, when the sun's up, about 33% of the renewable production is curtailed. And that isn't really dissipating. We're going to have more and more curtailments through broader portions of the year. How can we take that energy and make clean sundown energy? How can we make this energy transition happen? What has to happen to the cost of storage to have that longer duration to cover those clean sundown hours? Well, we'll dive right into that in the economics in just a minute. If we go to the next slide. This is the problem on the left with California. Is generally every year we're seeing increasing curtailed energy, and last year was trounced the year before in terms of curtailments. With the IRA, there's a lot coming in. We don't have, it's okay to have curtailments. I get it, cost of energy is relatively inexpensive and you're curtailing not that many hours, the economics still work out. But we also have a lot of energy that's not being furnished as clean energy during sundown hours. And there is a need, and the economics are starting to materialize for that clean sundown hours to come from that surplus during the day. That's shown on the left, and this exponentially increasing function of curtailed energy. In spring, in the fall, the shoulder seasons, we have excess beyond belief. Certainly some of those excesses, there's nothing we'll be able to do about it. It's beyond the diurnal cycle, it's seasonal surpluses. And maybe that's where hydrogen comes in. But shifting from sun up to sundown, that's where longer duration storage comes in, which is the focus of today's talk. On the right, we're looking at, this is actually Northwestern Energy. They have a lot of wind. Not too much solar in their system, but the point's being made that here we're running through first part of a week, I guess it's Friday through Sunday, and we're in surplus, the brown line being load, and then we have shortage on Tuesday and Wednesday of the week, and renewables drop off. How are we going to cover that? It's not as pure a cycle as when the sun's up and down. This is wind. and you're on for a few days and off for a few days. And longer duration storage can step in here as well. All right, go to the next slide. So what are the technologies that are going to cover those gaps? Be it integration, well, we kind of have that with lithium ion today, and flywheels, really short duration regulation. But as we move up in duration, there are other technologies that have, say, more compelling economics. We've heard a little bit about iron air. We're going to hear today from Joe Ferrari about energy dome, and I think it's compressed CO2, which kind of lines up nicely between compressed air and iron air in terms of duration. And traditionally we've had pump storage. Today, that's probably something that the newer technologies have an advantage over, but it's still something for existing infrastructure that could be adapted. We're seeing some of that in California. Hydrogen is something talked about. Just bear in mind its overall efficiency is probably about 20%. If you calculate the losses in generating the hydrogen phase changes and the generation of electricity and its efficiency from hydrogen. So what's out there is exciting and new, and there is going to be a longer duration storage, no doubt, as part of this energy transition. And when it occurs is going to be something we'll talk about in just a minute, but roughly the latter half of this decade, the economics start becoming quite compelling in California and elsewhere, probably at the, depending where you are, 2030 and beyond. Let's go to the next slide. So how should long duration storage be compensated? Well, that depends where you are. In California, it's pretty simple. There's a capacity market and an energy market, and you're going to look for revenues from both components. However, the capacity market is designed to reflect the true electric load carrying capability of the asset. Today, in California, 4-hour storage receives 100% capacity credit. As we get more and more 4-hour storage in the system, its relative contributions, its electric load carrying capability diminishes, and it diminishes through time or through further and further additions of 4-hour storage. And that's shown with the gray graph of the marginal ELCC or the blue line of the average ELCC. And there's some debate. I think New York's looking at a marginal, which is the gray line, and the blue is the average, which is where California is. And I think the blue line makes plenty of sense, and it provides a strong impetus for longer duration storage to come into the effect. What California's done is simple. They look at the drop off at around 20% or 18%. They say, look, we're going to give you full capacity through 2026, and then you need 6 hours for full capacity. In 2028, you need 8. And, something of this kind of classification of duration has been the signal to the market. And if you want to get what you're getting today for capacity revenues, you just need to have longer duration in 2028, 2030 timeframe. So people are eyeing that longer duration and saying, wow, that'd be very expensive with lithium ion. It doesn't have the same economics as some other technologies. We have all this curtailed energy. How can we make longer duration work? So let's go to the next slide. And I think it depends a little bit on where you are in terms of timing. And this is kind of the bottom line of the economics today. So on the far left, we're at 2023, and this is dollars per kilowatt year on the y-axis. And what we're seeing is a clustering of longer duration. The green lines are 10 and 12 hours, and the gray line is 4 hours. And there's not much of a difference today between 12 hours and 4-hour storage. You're going to get the same capacity component, and moreover, the energy arbitrage revenues don't increase significantly from going from 4 hours to 12 hours. All right, that's where the prices are today. But as we have more and more renewables, we have the belly of the duck getting lower and lower, particularly with the PTC on solar being significant. That's going to create more opportunity for, well, prices to be minus $40 a megawatt hour. Look a little bit more like SPP in terms of a lot of negative charging. And we'll see that. And as we have more and more renewables, there becomes more opportunity to have a lower, let's call it belly of the duck, and value for longer duration. Obviously, ELCC and capacity components is another dimension. So it's a combination of both energy and the increased value and capacity market through rewarding 8 hours plus in, call it 2028, that creates some opportunity. There isn't a distinguishing component between 10 and 12 hours. I mean, they get the same capacity value, and there's really no energy arbitrage. That's why those two green lines are effectively on top of each other. But as you can see through time, particularly as we get to the turn of the decade, which is 7 years away, we're looking at long duration storage economics really taking off and separating. Roughly, in the end, we're at least 30% more revenues. And if you can add from 4 hours to 8 hours with the site and the interconnect there, another 4 hours of storage, the economics are quite compelling. And it isn't that far off that those economics become quite compelling. All right, we're roughly moving from, and we can show us here the value per kilowatt year by duration, kind of the same graph on the far left. 2030 is at about $150 a kilowatt year versus $250 a kilowatt year for the longer duration storage. That's a big difference. That's excuse me, 70% extra. About that from the 4 hour storage. ERCOT is a little different. They don't have a capacity market. The price signals, because of the distributed, nature of their supply stack, doesn't provide as much continuous value as in California. Probably foremostly that absence of capacity market. So the distinction between long duration and short duration is different. Short duration storage, merchant storage in Texas today is 2 hours. A year ago, it was 1 hour. So Texas, the economics and the price signals there aren't quite as compelling as they are in California for long duration storage. And that's just the nature of that market. They have a lot of substitute with natural gas, and it's a different economic construct compared to California. If we can move on to the next slide. This slide gets at the importance of being efficient. What this is showing is on the RTE stands for round trip efficiency, not real-time energy, it's round trip efficiency. So the x-axis is the round trip efficiency. The colored lines start from pink at the bottom to gray at the top, goes from 12 to 4 hours. And what this is saying is the round trip efficiency versus an 85% efficient revenue, which is kind of where we see lithium ion storage. Its round trip efficiency is approximately 85% on average, at least in terms of guarantees. You might realize more than that, but that's a common, I say, criteria. So what we want, if the equivalent of 85% means you get 100% of a lithium ion today, what happens is we go towards longer duration storage with lower efficiencies. How much revenue are we going to lose relative to lithium ion? And you can see there's a kink at around 65%. So generally, this economic analysis is saying you probably want to be to the left of that kink or have efficiencies greater than 65% in terms of round trip efficiency. And you can clearly add more long duration storage in terms of the hours, and the efficiency penalties aren't that significant. That's really important to keep your eyes on. If it's relatively inexpensive to produce renewables and there's surpluses, particularly when the sun's up, you can take advantage of that surplus conditions in the belly of the duck where prices are suppressed and provide energy when the sundown hours. And if the efficiency is 65% or greater, you're going to get 85% of the revenues that you would from lithium ion. That pans out quite nicely. All right, next slide. And I think this is the last slide. So this is estimating the CapEx requirements to build long duration storage. And again, the same coloring, the dark line is the 4 hour, and the pink or watermelon colored line is the 12 hour. And what we're seeing through time is effectively, if you're looking at the present value of projects installed by year, what would the earnings be at different durations? And it's very clear that lithium ion can do well. I mean, so if you want to have a good present value, you want that to be high. There's a need, certainly at the turn of the decade, for long duration storage. The economics are really compelling. And you can see that red line, it just says, look, you're shifting right into longer duration storage. And you have to be there and ready to roll by the turn of the decade. You can't be at 4 hours and still doing well. You're going to earn half the capacity revenue, and there's a lot of other 4 hour storage. So some of this energy arbitrage revenue is consumed. There's a compelling need today to make rational decisions. That'd be 4 hours. But I think there's economics emerging, and as you look down the road towards the longer capacity durations that are needed, longer duration storage that can add more hours of storage at lower cost than lithium ion will have a big edge. All right, if we go to the last slide, it should just be questions and answers. Sergio, are we taking those questions and answers at the end, I'm assuming?
Yes, that's a great question. So we'll take all the questions from the Q&A at the end. So please, everyone in the audience, if you have questions, don't hesitate to put it in the Q&A and we'll get to that. To make time for that, I will urge our next two speakers to maybe do like 12 minutes. So we have a bit like 5 minutes for Q&A. So thank you for that presentation, Dr. Doris. We'll move on. Our next panelist is Jan Pepper, CEO of Peninsula Clean Energy. Jan has over 30 years of energy and utility experience with a focus on renewable energy contracting and financing. She formerly worked at Silicon Valley Power and has founded several energy-related startups. Jen was elected to the City Council of Los Altos in 2012 and served as mayor from December 2014 to December 2015. She was later re-elected in 2016 for a second term, for a second 4-year term. She also served on the board of directors of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District from 2013 to 2017. And she has earned a BS in Civil Engineering and an MBA from Stanford University. So thank you for joining us today, Jan, and let's get started. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me today. It's great to be here. So I'm not sure what the background is of all the people who are here today, but we're a CCA, Community Choice Energy Program, which is a not-for-profit public agency. We serve San Mateo County and the city of Los Banos in Merced County, and we are the generation provider. So we source all the electricity that is going to serve our customers, and PG&E still delivers it over their poles and wires. We started in 2016. Our current product is 100% clean, of which 50% is renewable. Our rates are 5% less than PG&E, and because of that, we've saved our customers $90 million over the course of time since we started. So let's go to the next slide, please. So why are we, as a community choice energy, as a load serving entity, interested in long duration storage? There's two reasons why we're interested in it. First of all, we as an organization have a goal to be 100% renewable on a 24/7 basis by 2025. So I'll talk about that for a few moments. And then there also are regulatory requirements in California that require us to procure long duration storage. So if we go to the next slide. So we are looking to be 100% renewable on a 24/7 basis because we feel like this is where the industry is going. And in order to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we need to make the grid more renewable and more sustainable and reduce the demand signal for fossil-based resources. So we as an organization are procuring renewables to meet our load. So in this diagram here, the black line is our load on an average day. The other colors are the different resources that we're using to serve that load, with geothermal in red, small hydro in light blue, wind in dark blue, solar in yellow, and storage. So before we add storage, we have a lot of excess solar. So all of that, the lined areas above the line there are excess solar, and what we're doing is storing that solar currently in 4-hour batteries and then discharging that in those solid green areas to make sure that we can serve our load hour by hour. If we go to the next slide, this shows what happens seasonally though. So if we look at the seasons, and this kind of builds on what Gary was talking about earlier, if we look at the spring and the summer, because the solar is generating a lot during those times, we have a lot of excess solar. But in order to meet our load in the winter, we've had to procure a lot of solar to meet our winter loads. And you can see in the winter, the bottom right graph, that there's a lot less solar that's produced. And there are hours in the evenings and the early mornings where our supply, even with storage, is not sufficient to totally meet our load. So we need long duration storage or seasonal storage to meet this need. And Gary talked about this from the storage owner's perspective, and I'll be talking about this from the load serving entity's perspective, actually as a purchaser of this storage via PPAs, and a number of the things that he talked about, particularly the round trip efficiency, has a big impact on our economics. We may be interested in a type of storage technology, but if the round trip efficiency is not so great, it's going to make it much more expensive to utilize that technology. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about the second reason that we're interested in long duration storage, which are the regulatory requirements in California. And the Public Utilities Commission adopted a decision back in 2021 to meet the state's midterm reliability needs. And they said that all of the load serving entities need to procure 11,500 megawatts of new resources, and 4,500 megawatts of that is subject to specific category requirements. So if we go to the next slide, this shows how it breaks out by technology. And you can see here for long duration storage resources that we are, as a collective group of load serving entities, required to procure 1,000 megawatts of long duration storage by 2026. And this can be extended to 2028 if we ask for that by last week. And long duration storage, as defined by the Public Utilities Commission, is a minimum of 8 hours discharge. If we go to the next slide, this shows what it means for us as a load serving entity. So our portion of that 1,000 megawatts is 19 megawatts, and that's what we are working as an organization to procure. And let's go to the next slide. Gary also talked about the ELCCs, the effective load carrying capacities. And so the batteries have limits on their ability to be dispatched either with total energy or the time of day. And so the PUC has set these ELCCs for different technologies, and you can see for batteries that the ELCC drops depending on the year that we're looking at. But you can also see that for the longer duration storage, the ELCCs are higher. So that's good because that allows us to value more of that in terms of providing deliverability and providing resource adequacy. So if we're looking at a technology, not only are we seeing the impact of round trip efficiency, making it more expensive to utilize that technology, we're also looking at the ELCC, further derating the value of that storage technology, which we need to take into account for our economics. So if you're planning to bid into one of our RFOs, so bid a really low price because then it will be much more attractive for us. If we can go to the next slide, please. So a number of CCAs in California, there are 25 community choice energy programs now in California, and a number of us banded together to do joint procurement of resources that we have a common need for. So like for us, we needed 19 megawatts of long duration storage. If there was a company that was offering that, they probably want to build a project that's larger than that. So if the CCAs join together and do joint procurement, then we can put out a request for offer, we can contract for this resource, and then we can split that up amongst ourselves to meet the regulatory requirements, and for us, our additional 24/7 requirements. So we issued an RFO back in October of 2020, looking for resources that were at least 50 megawatts minimum, with a delivery term of at least 10 years and a minimum of 8 hours of storage. And the next slide, please. So we received, next slide, please. So we received a number of offers, 51 entities bid, over 9,000 megawatts of projects were bid, a total of 221 unique pricing offers and 8 technology types. And those technology types that were bid into the RFO included batteries, storage, chemical flow, compressed air, fuel cell and hydrogen, hybrid resources, mechanical systems using gravity, pumped hydro, and thermal resources. So it was really great to get so many bids in and to look at all of these different technologies and be able to kind of compare them one to another as to what was going to meet our needs. And the durations of the bids that we received included 8, 10, 12, and multi-day discharge durations. So we evaluated all of those projects that came in, and a number of those fell out. A number of them weren't really ready to actually build their projects and be ready by 2026. And so we ended up, if we go to the next slide, and these are slides from CC Power. So 7 of the CCAs that are part of CC Power decided to move forward with procuring long duration storage via this mechanism. And we are one of them, and you can see the other CCAs that were part of it. And of all those bids that we got in, 2 projects were, we moved 2 projects to actual completion, to contracting. So the next slide, please. So the first project that we contracted with through CC Power is they're both lithium ion projects. The first one is called Tumbleweed. It's a 69 megawatt project, 552 megawatt hours, located in Kern County. It's lithium ion. Its COD is July of next year. It's an 8-hour project, and the price is based on a fixed dollars per kilowatt month. So we are part of this project. We as Peninsula Clean Energy are one of the participants in this project. And actually, this project has now been increased to 75 megawatts. So we're getting a little bit more from that project. The next slide, please. The second project that got to contracting is the Goal Line project, which is also a lithium-ion 8-hour storage project. It's a 50 megawatt project, 400 megawatt hours, located in Southern California in Escondido. The COD is June of 2025. Again, the pricing is based on fixed dollars per megawatt, fixed dollars per kilowatt month, and it's a 15-year term. We as Peninsula Clean Energy did not sign up to be a part of this project, but the other CCAs did. And so that's kind of what it looks like from from a load serving entity perspective. So last slide. Thank you for your attention. Our vision as an organization is a sustainable world with clean energy for everyone, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer period towards the end of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. A very interesting perspective as well, looking at it from the other side. So let's jump to our last speaker, Joe Ferrari. Is Vice President of Sales for North America for Energy Dome. Joe holds 2 master's degrees, one in aerospace engineering from the University of Cincinnati, and the second one in natural resource science from the University of Maryland. He has close to 2 decades of experience in the energy space, looking at how utilities can plan to meet their 100% clean energy targets. His prior experience includes 2 years at Man Energy Solutions, where he worked on advanced storage technologies, and 15 years at Wärtsilä North America, where, including his sales experience, he also spearheaded market development efforts for the energy transition team using simulation tools such as Plexos. So definitely a pretty well-rounded experience, Joe. So looking forward to your presentation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to talk about new long-duration energy storage technologies that can help us get to 100% renewable. So basically, what are some technologies that can help us on our path to 100%? Next slide, please. So a little bit about Energy Dome. We are an energy storage company. We were founded in June of 2019 by our founder and CEO, Claudio Spadaccini. Our mission is to basically help fight the fight against climate change by helping this transition to 100%. And our focus is on utility scale, long duration energy storage with the ultimate aim to help power a renewable world. Next slide, please. So I think we've heard quite a bit from our 2 panelists prior, and thank you so much for your input. There is a growing desire and interest for non-lithium ion long duration energy storage. I think depending on who you talk to, as power systems get to about 40% renewable penetration, they start to see a need for longer duration storage, 8 to 16 plus hours. There are concerns over lithium ion supply chains and risks, concerns about the competitiveness of lithium ion in the 8+ hour space, and there's other technologies needed to fill this gap. So when you see a symbol like the one shown here, this graphic, there's a battery symbol shown there often, but that battery doesn't have to be lithium ion. It can be any type of energy storage technology. And in fact, as a long duration energy storage provider, we're seeing a growing number of RFPs that are very specific to LDES. They're saying things like it has to be 8 to 12 plus hours, and it can be any technology except lithium ion. And we're seeing this in places like California and Texas, all throughout the US and into Canada. Next slide, please. So there are many different flavors of long duration energy storage. They're all batteries. And I've broken them down here into categories based on the potential energies that they leverage. So electrochemical is things like traditional batteries or flow batteries. You have gravity systems. So there are things that exploit height differences. It could be water differences in pumped hydro. It could be weights in a gravity system. There are thermomechanical systems that leverage temperature differences. These could be molten salt technologies or technologies using thermal oils. And then finally, we get to pressure-based systems, which is also a thermomechanical type system. But what they're doing is driving a hot, high-pressure gas for expansion through a turbine to produce electricity. And these include technologies like compressed air energy storage, liquid air energy storage, and liquid CO2 storage. Next slide, please. So there's advantages to pressure-based systems. One of them is, no matter which one of these you look at, they all use standard turbo machinery. These are compressors, turbines, things like that. These are mature, bankable technologies. There's no chemicals involved. There's no electrolytes, no tanks of molten oils or molten salts or thermal oils. No dependence on unstable or considered risky supply chains that you might find related to lithium ion. The equipment can be sourced locally. Most of these projects are concrete and steel and some plastics, which are all recyclable, by the way. And then finally, they don't suffer any degradation over time. So there might be tiny differences in turbine output, year 1 versus year 20. But what these pressure-based systems do not have is any need for augmentation throughout the lifetime of the project. Next slide. So when you look at these pressure-based long-duration energy storage systems, we have things like compressed air, liquid air, CO2 battery. They're all offered in the 8 to 16-hour plus durations. The CapEx can vary. Liquid air is a little bit more expensive because you have cryogenics involved. Compressed air is fantastic technology, low cost, about $200 per kilowatt hour. CO2 battery is right in that range with compressed air energy storage. We're in the $150 to $250 per kilowatt hour range. And that range is dependent on the, what size of project you're talking about. So for Energy Dome with our CO2 battery, they come in pre-engineered 20 megawatt by 10 hour modules. So if you install one, it's going to be in the $250 per kilowatt hour range. If you install 10 of them side by side for 200 megawatts by 10 hours, it's going to come down to the $150 per kilowatt range. Efficiencies, compressed air is similar. It's about 60 to 65%. Liquid air is 50% range, and that's mainly influenced by the cryogenic load on the system, auxiliary loads, parasitic loads. And CO2 battery is very high in this range. It's 75%. Covered the size ranges. In terms of constraints, compressed air, fantastic technology, but it does need to be located at or near salt caverns. Liquid air is great when you don't need a lot of space, when you need a small footprint. And the CO2 battery, we do have a land requirement, mainly for the dome, which you can maybe see over this shoulder. I can't point right with the image being flipped, but you see this dome over my shoulder. That takes up about 10 acres per 20 megawatt module. But the beautiful thing is the CO2 battery is offered in these pre-engineered 20 megawatt modules, so the sales process is quick. So we don't have questions like how many megawatts do you need by how many hours, and then have to custom engineer something for that. Next slide, please. So just real brief, all three of these systems are very similar. On the top left, you see compressed air energy storage. You take energy from the grid, you compress air, store it in a storage system, a cavern, and when you need electricity, you push it out through a generator, a turbine that spins a generator, produce electricity. Liquid air on the top right, very similar. You have charging on one side, discharging on the other, the turbo machinery, and in the middle, you're storing cryogenically stored liquid air. So, very high technology, special materials, high parasitic losses. In the bottom, you see the liquid CO2 system, a CO2 battery, where we have a dome on the right. When the system charges, it pulls CO2 from that dome. It's a closed loop. The CO2 is compressed to about 40 to 50 bar, about 400 degrees Celsius. We capture that heat in a thermal energy storage system, and then it goes through a final condenser phase into the liquid CO2 storage phase. The liquid CO2 is kept at ambient temperature. We don't need cryogenics, and in carbon steel tanks, pressure vessels, all standard equipment. Next slide, please. On the left, you see how the CO2 battery works during charging. The compressor sucks the CO2 out of the dome. Like I said, we take the heat of compression out in our thermal energy storage system, and then it's liquefied at pressure and at ambient temperature, and the CO2 in the dome is drawn down. In the dome, there's actually two domes. There's an outer dome, which is the permanent inflatable structure, And then there's the inner dome, which is the gas holder. And that's a bladder system that increases or that inflates and deflates with CO2, depending on charging state. Then in discharging, you just reverse the process. The CO2 liquid is regasified. It goes through an evaporator, picks up the heat of compression, goes through a turbine, which spins a shaft connected to a generator and produces electricity. Next slide. I do want to note that we have a demonstration plant in Sardinia, Italy. It's a smaller version of our commercial offering. It's only 2.5 megawatts by 4 megawatt hours. It was a demonstration plant to prove that the CO2 battery concept works. Just wanted to note that Energy Dome acted as the EPC contractor for this project. We delivered it on time and within 8% of the budget. We are not an EPC company, rather we manage the EPC, subcontracting out to civil, mechanical, electrical to get this job in Sardinia. But I do want to say that we actually did this under duress, because you saw we started around 2020, right when COVID hit. Italy was under some of the strictest lockdowns globally for COVID concerns, and yet we managed to deliver this demo plant in record time. And if any of you are interested, we are happy to give tours of this. You will probably have to fly into Milan and spend a night in Italy and then take a day trip over to Sardinia. But we're very proud of this accomplishment, and we love to show it off. Next slide, please. So speaking of economics, and thank you so much, Jan and Gary, for your stuff. I did want to say I did some sort of back of the envelope calculations of my own, looking at types of revenues you can get based on, for long duration storage, 10 hours. And I looked at CAISO, picked NP15, maybe I should have picked SP15, but for demonstration purposes, that's fine. Obvious reasons being the procurement mandate and the fact that California is leading the charge with long duration energy storage. We also looked at ERCOT LZ West, Western ERCOT, so they're facing a lot of wind curtailment issues. And then I picked sort of off the wall Dominion Zone in PJM. Virginia Clean Energy Act has a storage mandate. It's not specific to long duration storage, but it is a couple gigawatts of storage. So we looked at 2022 day-ahead LMPs, pure energy shifting, charged during the cheapest 10 hours, discharged during the highest price 10 hours. And we looked at we looked across the full spectrum of efficiencies, but focused in on 50%, which might be representative of liquid air, 65% efficient, which might be representative for compressed air, and some things like flow battery technologies. And then finally 75%, which is the domain of CO2 battery and very close to pumped hydro. Next slide, please. So what we have here, the revenue on a $1 per kilowatt or $1 per megawatt installed basis. Red line is CAISO NP15. Black is DOM Zone in Virginia. And the green one is ERCOT LZ West. And what you can see is, as you'd expect, and Gary's own chart showed the same thing, as you have higher efficiencies, you get higher revenues. And you have to couple this with, what are the capital or, the capital cost of these types of projects. So liquid air or, even thermal molten salt systems with electrical heaters, they're 50% RTE, lowest revenue, but some of the highest costs. Compressed air energy storage, great technology, CapEx reasonable in the $200 per kilowatt hour range, 65% round trip efficiency. And then you look at the CO2 battery economics, we're in the $150 to $250 per kilowatt hour range with some of the highest revenue expectations in any of these three markets. So Gary, I really picked up on what you said, that long duration storage must be cheap and it must be efficient. I think the CO2 battery's got super high efficiency in this realm, good net revenue expectations, and a very low CapEx. And when you look at this combination of high revenue coupled with low CapEx, it can mean one of two things depending on who the purchaser is. If it's a developer or an IPP, it yields the highest IRR. And if it's a utility, it yields the lowest cost for ratepayers. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or queries about the CO2 battery and carry this conversation forward. That's my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. So with that, let's move quickly to our Q&A portion. I'd like to start with one for everyone in the panel, really. would you have an idea of like a rule of thumb of a level of renewables penetration that would be a sort of tipping point towards the adoption of LDES, long duration energy storage? Like Joe, you mentioned something like that in your presentation. I don't know if others have any thoughts.
Yeah, I just real quick, I think, you depending on what power system you look at it, up to 20, 30, up to about 40%, you can get by with lithium ion 4-hour type technologies. As you get the higher renewable penetrations, things change. And I can say, I did see a presentation by one utility from the Southwest late last year where they showed they anticipate up to 6 gigawatts of solar being added to their system. They felt the first gigawatt, maybe into the second, they could get by fine with just lithium ion 4-hour type duration. Whereas when they got into the third, fourth, fifth gigawatt of solar, they saw this growing need for longer duration technologies, 8, 10, 12 plus hours.
Any other thoughts, Gary, Jane? Nope.
Well, I think as you go towards 24/7 green, you just need long duration storage. There's no question about that. And the economics just become more and more compelling as we have more concentration of the same resource. So solar's the least cost resource. We have curtailed energy when the sun's up, roughly between 10 and 3 every day for at least 6 months of the year. Long duration storage makes a lot of economic sense, particularly now that the IRA is here. And there is a need to begin looking at not just matching RECs on an annual basis for clean, but on an hourly basis. And that's where long duration comes in. I think the market price signals in California are, you can just look down the road, 2026, 2028. You should be looking at this. And the extent to which we're having negative pricing, I think there's this belief that, that'll go away. That's not happening. It's here. And we're headed more towards SPP, where we have nodes that are just perpetually low. And, the IRA with the PTC brings it to in California, minus 45, certainly by 2030 per megawatt hour. That is a nice, nice to get paid $45 a megawatt hour to charge and bring it in the night. That's long duration storage. So there's a lot of, let's say, commercial reasons to begin looking at this as the technology is maturing, and we're at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, in our analysis, we show that we need a lot more storage. We haven't differentiated it necessarily between long duration and 4-hour storage, but definitely need it as we're going to 100% renewables.
Jan, if I could just build on that, it's the ratio, as you're saying, between renewables and storage that matters. And right now, the ratio across the country is winning very much towards renewables. So we just have a lot more curtailed renewables. And for liability reasons, we're not going to replace thermal with more thermal, and that's not going to happen. So storage is coming in as a whole. I think, among California is way ahead of the curve. Among our customers that are not in California, there's this unknown dimension of storage and its true capabilities. But I think that will diminish through time. Everybody wants things to be very similar to the way they were. Long duration storage is the closest to thermal that we can get, and very akin to pump storage, which there's a certain traditional fondness for.
Right.
Very well. Yeah.
If I could just ask Jan, you've done some work, certainly at your customer base. You're kind of the head of the spear of 24/7 clean, and that's something that you're tracking, I know, and looking at when you're long and short on a month-hour basis, and presumably long duration storage is part of the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the economics. We certainly want it, but we have to balance out what's the difference between what the prices are for lithium ion, which right now are less expensive than long duration. I mean, we as an organization would prefer to get away from lithium ion and to more environmentally friendly technologies, but we need to see the prices come down, and we need, you know, when you look at the round trip efficiencies, that really has an impact on it, because, you know, if certainly we're producing excess renewables and you store it, and if you lose a lot of that from the round trip efficiency, maybe it's not so bad. But if the price that we're being asked to pay for that is still too high, then it just doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Jen,
some people asking if the presentation will be available after the webinar. It will be. I just wanted to ask another quick question as well, specific to Energy Dome. Can the Energy Dome technology discharge power at variable rates? Can it match fluctuations in load? Joe, do you have a comment on that? Others on the importance of that? Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at the, you know, the dispatch simulations that we've done throughout all three markets that I showed there, it would be expected that the charging and the discharging cycles would not be continuous, right? You might have a couple hours of charging, prices might change. Okay, you charge another couple hours, so we can move up and down against price signals both for the charging and for the discharging.
Excellent. And I guess a form of final question that I wanted to ask is, what are some of the developments? I think all of you touched upon the issue in California of the fact that 4-hour storage right now gets full resource adequacy credits. Now in California, we're moving perhaps towards something very new, very novel, that we're calling slice of day, which is basically a framework for resource adequacy where we're trying to cover load and cover the actual capacity requirement for every hour. So perhaps, Jan, this is a good question for you. How are those developments affecting how you view long duration energy storage now that it's a bit more than an IRP mandate and maybe it influences RA as well?
Yeah, I think it's still under discussion. It hasn't been totally adopted yet, but it does make it an already complicated and expensive market more complicated, but hopefully not less expensive. So I don't have a complete answer for you, but we're certainly watching it. We're very involved. Our regulatory team is very engaged in how this is looked at and how it might be designed ultimately. So, you know, as we're moving to 24/7 renewables, meeting our load, I mean, we think that this makes sense in the long run, but the details are still being worked out.
Yeah, Sergio, I'd say if you want to take a lens to look into the future, clearly the work on ELCC in kind of the initial going from 4 to 6 to 8, 26, 28, respectively for 6 and 8 here, storage. I think that's probably the lens to look at today, because as Jan says, it's still in the nascent stages and it's a concept, but the other is already there and laid out as the framework for capacity. But it's, look, 3 years away, we're at 2026, and you know, that's suddenly 4 hours becomes worth 50% less. You need 6 to get the whole RA value.
Yeah.
Yep.
Joe, I have a question
difficult
specific for you. Maybe with this one we can close out. What are the challenges you have faced in bringing Energy Dome to the US that might be US specific?
I don't think it's necessarily US specific, but you know, we are a new technology, so we have a ton of interest from IPPs, developers, utilities, but at the same time, we're a new technology. So even if we're relatively low cost, $200 to $250 per kilowatt hour, you're talking about a $40 to $50 million investment for a 20 megawatt by 10 hour module. That's not a small chunk of change, right? So one of the, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a challenge, it's more of a process that we just have to work through. And that is working with our potential customers on due diligence, right? They want to see everything about the plant. They want to know all the different components, how it all works together. What are the, you know, what are some concerns or risks over supply chains or anything like that, which we really don't have much, but we have to address these questions. So it's been a process, and I think anybody trying to introduce a newer type of storage technology is going through the same thing. But what we've been very successful at so far is working with, say, installation contractors, EPC companies, and also O&M companies to get quotes from them. And these are, tier 1 reputable O&M companies, tier 1 EPC companies that people know in the industry. And we're getting some really good and fairly firm estimates. So that was another thing that we had to face early on is, okay, we could talk about our technology, but what everybody wants to know is, what does it cost, right? Turnkey cost. Okay, you can talk about everything, but what does it cost? What's the number? And to really get confidence in that number, we have to come in with installation quotes from actual EPC companies, O&M quotes from actual O&M companies. And we've been very successful at that, and it's an ongoing process. So it's been fun.
Yeah, certainly one of the advantages of the off-the-shelf components as well, as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you all so much for your participation, for you panelists and for the audience. This will be available in our recording and the materials, and we look forward to keep in touch with all of you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Gary. And you too, Sergio.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here today.
Likewise.